Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining the Technology Learning Collaborative webinar, Funding Digital Equity Work. My name is Kate Rivera. I'm a consultant with the Technology Learning Collaborative, and we are joined today by Caitlin, the Nonprofit Services Supervisor at the Regional Foundation Center. Caitlin's going to be presenting about some of the free resources that are available to nonprofits at the Free Library of Philadelphia. And then after her presentation, I'll be sharing a few resources that are specific to digital equity work. And just before we get started, I will just share a little bit with you about TLC. So we are a professional development organization dedicated to digital literacy providers and advocates. Our mission is to drive the digital literacy, access, and inclusion conversation in Philadelphia by promoting professional collaboration, training, and networking among organizations and institutions that have a dedicated interest in moving these areas forward. If you're not already familiar with us or connected with us, I just dropped links in the chat so you could connect with us on social media, join our email list. We also have a Slack community, and we're really a place where you can stay connected to new information and resources and funding opportunities as they come out. Just a couple quick housekeeping notes. This webinar is being recorded and it will be posted to the TLC YouTube channel. We'll also be emailing the presentation slides to everyone who registered for today's event. So if you have to leave early or you know someone who missed the webinar, they'll still be able to access this content afterwards. And if you have any questions or comments during the presentation, feel free to drop them in the chat, and we'll also have some time for questions at the end. Okay, and with that, I will turn things over to Caitlin.
Great, thank you so much, Kate, and thanks for having me here today. Hi, everyone. So as Kate said, I am Caitlin Seifritz. I am the Nonprofit Services Supervisor at the Regional Foundation Center. Today I'm going to tell you a little bit more about what the Regional Foundation Center does and how we can assist all of you as nonprofit organizations. And then I'm going to be doing a brief demonstration of our most popular resource, Foundation Directory Online. So you can do your own research to find funding opportunities for the work that you're doing. So just want to get started by telling you a little bit more about who we are and what we do. So we are a nonprofit resource center at the Free Library of Philadelphia, and we have been serving Philly's nonprofit community for almost 50 years. So we will be celebrating our 50-year anniversary in 2024. So really excited for that. But we serve the nonprofit community by kind of offering them these core services. So we have research appointments with a librarian. So if you are unfamiliar with any of our databases or resources, you can schedule a one-on-one with me, and I'm happy to sit down with you and go over resources geared towards the specific needs of your organization. Most people have been opting for virtual appointments at this point, but we can also accommodate in-person appointments as well. And then as far as the databases that we provide access to, so I mentioned Foundation Directory Online, that's what we're going to really be focusing on today, but I will just briefly highlight the other resources we have as well. So we do subscribe to Donor Search. So if you are looking to do research on individuals who may be interested in giving to your organization, we do provide access to Donor Search on site here at the Parkway Central Library. We also provide access to Foundation Maps, which takes the data in Foundation Directory Online and presents it in a more visual format. So it's a great way to kind of visualize trends in philanthropy. We also provide access to Guidestar, which we will also be touching on briefly later on in today's presentation. And then we subscribe to a really powerful database called Simply Analytics, which is really great for doing research on demographics. So if anyone's used the census website before, I know it can sometimes be a little bit cumbersome and hard to find information there, but Simply Analytics makes it super easy to get demographics about a certain neighborhood or zip code in Philadelphia. And then we also offer free workshops and professional development opportunities for nonprofit organizations. So this is a great opportunity for you to learn a new skill and also network with other nonprofit professionals in the field. So we have a few upcoming workshops that I want to highlight. So we typically do take July off from programming, so our upcoming calendar is a little bit light, but we are launching a 3-part series on July 20th called Avenues to Action, Doing DEI Within Your Nonprofit. So for this 3-part series, the Regional Foundation Center partnered with PANO, the Pennsylvania Association of Nonprofit Organizations, and Villanova University's Department of Public Administration to offer a cohort series that brings together nonprofit professionals in the Philadelphia area to talk about not just DEI at their organization, but how to actually move forward with the DEI initiatives or projects they've been talking about within their own organizations. We've heard from a lot of nonprofits who have had these conversations with their staff and board, but they're not exactly sure what the next step should be. So during this 3-part series, you'll be learning a lot, but you'll also have the opportunity to work on a project. So you'll leave the series having completed a project. So that's coming up starting in July, and then the other 2 dates are in August. And then I also want to highlight a free service that we offer, which is immensely popular, and that is free headshots. So twice a month, you can come to the library and get a free professional headshot taken. So those are available on the 1st and 3rd Thursdays of the month between 1 p.m. and 3 p.m. It's drop-in only, so no appointments are taken. The upcoming dates for that are going to be July 7th and July 21st. And then I'll also mention that we do a 3-part grant writing series a few times throughout the year. So we will be doing that series again in August. So I have the dates there. It's just kind of a save the date right now. We don't have information on our website just yet. Hope to get that up soon. But that series will include Intro to Finding Grants, Intro to Proposal Writing, and Intermediate Grant Writing. So hopefully you will join us for some of those upcoming workshops. And if you'd like to learn more about anything that we do, our appointments, our databases, our upcoming events, you can visit our website, freelibrary.org/nonprofit. And then I do just want to mention, so we are located at the Parkway Central Library within the Business Resource and Innovation Center, or as we like to call it, the BRIC. And in the BRIC, we not only serve nonprofit professionals, but we also serve entrepreneurs and small businesses, job seekers, and inventors. So you can see the lovely space on the screen. It's also my background. I'm sitting in one of our meeting rooms right now. So we do have meeting rooms available for nonprofits and small businesses and job seekers to reserve. So if you have an in-person meeting, a virtual meeting, an interview that you need a meeting room space for, you're welcome to use one of our meeting rooms. You can email us to reserve a room. My contact information will be at the end of the slides. All right, so now that you know a little bit more about us, I'm going to talk to you today about funding opportunities for your organization, specifically around digital literacy, digital equity. So to do that, we're going to be talking about a resource called Foundation Directory Online. So I'm just going to give you kind of a brief overview of what this is, how to search it, and then I'm going to pull it up and do a quick demonstration of how to use the resource. So Foundation Directory Online allows you to search for funders that may be interested in funding your organization. The database was created by a nonprofit organization called Candid, and Candid is the result of a merger of 2 organizations, Guidestar and Foundation Center. So those 2 organizations have long been leaders in collecting data on the philanthropic sector. So with the merger of those 2 organizations to create Candid, that just means even more data is being collected on the nonprofit sector. So Foundation Directory Online is really kind of like the cornerstone of what it is Candid has been doing over the past few decades, but they really just wanted to make it easier for nonprofits to find funding opportunities. And one of the reasons for that is only about 10% of foundations actually have websites. So I always like to kind of drop that stat into this conversation just to remind people that Googling is only going to get you so far. So using a dedicated resource like Foundation Directory Online is going to really help you not only generate a prospect list, but generate a prospect list of funders that are going to be a good match for your organization. So Foundation Directory Online is accessible at the Parkway Central Library for free. So you're welcome to come in anytime we are open. No appointment is necessary. I do recommend bringing a laptop so you can do your research from your own laptop at the library, but we do have a few public computers available for you to use as well. Currently, our hours are Monday to Friday, 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. A little bit later, I'm going to talk about how you can get free access to a remote version of Foundation Directory Online. But if you want to get the full scope of Foundation Directory Online, you do have to be here at the Parkway Central Library to do that. And when you're searching Foundation Directory Online, you'll be able to get information on funders that meet your search criteria. You'll be able to see a list of past grants that a funder has given out, and you'll be able to see information on the recipients who have received those grants. So it really is a very robust and comprehensive research tool. I'll also just briefly note where they're getting the information from for Foundation Directory Online. So a lot of the information is coming from Funders 990, so the financial documents that all nonprofits have to submit, but we're also getting information from annual reports, websites, and news articles. And then one of the things that I really love about Foundation Directory Online is that funders have the ability to self-report the grants they've given out. So you're going to get really current information in this database. So there is data in here from 2022, for example. So way before probably most funders have even submitted their financial documents for this year. So before we jump into Foundation Directory Online, I do a demonstration. I always like to tell people that it can be helpful for your research strategy to first identify your needs. So once you start searching, it can be really exciting and you're going to end up down a rabbit hole. So if you've kind of thought through your search process a little bit, it's just going to help you be a little bit more organized in your research. So I recommend asking yourself these three questions. Who am I serving? Where are they, and what am I doing for them? Those are going to kind of mimic the main search boxes in Foundation Directory Online. So again, it will really help you develop a search strategy before you even start searching Foundation Directory Online. So once you've kind of answered those questions, and you may want to do this just by jotting down a few sentences or bullet points. What you'll want to do then is try to figure out what search terms in Foundation Directory Online best match what it is you're trying to do. So Candid created something called the Philanthropy classification system. And this is essentially a master list of all the terminology that describes the work that nonprofits are doing and what funders are funding. And the reason they did this is because that way, when you're searching Foundation Directory Online, when funders are adding their grants information to the database, everything is just tagged and categorized using the same terminology. So these areas in bold are going to be kind of the main search boxes in Foundation Directory Online. So subject will describe the work that's being done or what you need funding for. So you can think of search terms that describe your organization as a whole, or you can think about specific search terms that describe a specific program or project you're looking to get funding for. So that's subject. Population will describe who's benefiting from your programs and services. So you may work with a very specific population. Maybe you work with veterans or immigrants or senior citizens. Thinking about who it is that you're serving will also help you kind of connect you to funders interested in supporting that population. Support strategy is going to describe how the money will be used at your organization or what it will be used to support. So by that, I mean, is the money going to be used for general operating, for capital, for program development? So not all funders are going to provide different types of support. So if you can identify a funder who's going to provide the support that you need, that means they're going to be a better match for you. And then you're also going to have to include a geographic focus. So that's just going to describe where the work is being done. So for this, you can include a city, a county, a region, or a state. So if all the work that you do is in Philadelphia, you'll put that in as your geographic focus. If you serve Philadelphia and the surrounding counties, then you could use the Delaware Valley region as your geographic focus. And I always like to note that you can't go super specific, like you can't do a neighborhood or a zip code. So I'm going to pull up the philanthropy classification system now. The website is just taxonomy.candid.org, just so I can show you how you would access this and use this. So you'll see here at the top, we have these different tabs. The ones I already mentioned, subjects, populations, and support strategies are listed there. If I click on subjects and scroll down, we will see this very large but very kind of broad list of subject terms. And each of these subject terms can be expanded so that you can find a more specific subject term. So for example, if I was to open up information and communications, and then if I opened up media access and technology or information and communications, we'll find things like the internet as an example. And if you're unsure what any of these search terms mean, or you want to know how the taxonomy is describing them, you can click on any of the search terms and you will get a definition. So how are they defining internet, for example? So I always like looking at the definitions because it's going to give me a little bit more context. They will also sometimes give you some hints. So it says if you're doing this, then you may actually want to use this other search term. A lot of people will ask me, should I search for something really specific or should I search for something broader? I would say there's not necessarily a wrong way to search, but just keep in mind, the more specific you go, the less search results you're going to get. The broader you go, the more search results you're going to get. I also think nonprofits tend to think of the work that they do in very granular and specific terms, where funders tend to think of what they fund in slightly broader terms. So I would say keep that in mind. So for example, if you were to search internet and foundation director online, you only got a few search results, then you could take one step back in the hierarchy. Maybe you would then search telecommunications, for example. So that's kind of just like a brief overview of the taxonomy. I recommend taking a look at it before you even jump into Foundation Directory Online, just so you can kind of list out all the search terms that you think would be beneficial for what it is you're trying to get funding for. And I just listed out here on the slides some of the subject terms that I thought would be most useful for organizations doing work around digital equity, digital literacy. So as I said, a lot of the work you'll do will fall under the information and communications subject area, but you could also look under education for adult education. There's also community and economic development. And I'm sure a lot of the organizations on the call today, they aren't just doing digital equity. You are all probably touching a lot of other areas as well. So you could look for subject terms that would best match that work. So it's not enough to just figure out your search terms, plug them into Foundation Director Online and say, okay, I have this list of funders. Once you have your list of funders, you'll want to evaluate them and see how good of a fit they are. This research is really all about finding the best match for your organization. You really don't want to waste your time chasing after a funder who is not interested in funding the work that you do. So once you get your list of search results, I recommend asking yourself these 5 questions as you're reviewing each of the prospects on your list. So first, do I meet this funder's requirements? I know it sounds very basic and simple, but funders tell me all the time that they get applications from nonprofits that do not meet the requirements. So think about requirements as in, you are doing the work that they fund, you are maybe the size or your budget is the size that they're looking for, you have the staff, the financials, whatever it is that the funder is requiring, make sure you carefully read that before moving forward. The next question I recommend asking is my mission or project's goals a priority for this funder? So again, it's all about finding the right match with a funder. So looking to see what their priorities are, what they funded in the past, what types of organizations they've supported in the past. That's going to be a good indicator of whether or not, or what the priorities are for that particular funder. You're also going to want to look at the grant size that a funder typically gives out. So some funders will some funders will say we have grants available for $10,000, in which case you kind of know what you could expect from that funder. But not all funders will do that. So you'll want to research the typical grant size that they give out. And then your ask of them should be in line with what they typically give. So if you find a funder that's a really good fit, but they only give out like grants of $100,000, you're not going to then ask that funder for $5,000. It's just kind of, again, not in line with their priorities. So looking at the typical grant size they give out is going to be a really important piece of this research process and evaluating that prospect. And number 4 is kind of tied to number 2. Does this funder support organizations like mine? So luckily in Foundation Director Online, you can see a list of the past grants that a funder has given out and information about the grants and the recipients who received those grants. So if a funder has funded a similar project or organization in the past, there's a good chance they're going to want to fund you. So it's really important to look at what those funders have who they've supported in the past. And then lastly, do I know anybody associated with this funder? So while you don't necessarily need to know someone at a foundation to get your foot in the door or apply for a grant with them, it can be helpful if you have some kind of contact. So in Foundation Director Online, in a funder's profile, you'll be able to see people associated with the organization, such as board members and staff members. So you could always share that list with your organization staff, your board, your network, see if there's anyone with a common connection. And if you don't know somebody at that foundation, again, that's totally fine. But I always recommend that unless the funder specifically says don't call us, that you actually pick up the phone, call a funder, introduce yourself to them, let them know that you're going to be applying for a grant with them. If you do have any specific questions about the process or whether you are a good fit, that's a great time to ask the funder. So it's all about relationship building. So if you can start to build that relationship early before you submit the application, it's going to be really beneficial. So those are some of kind of my tips about getting yourself ready for searching Foundation Director Online and then evaluating your prospects. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to actually pull up Foundation Director Online, do kind of a quick search, just so you can kind of see the full capabilities of this. This is a fairly short workshop today. I will note, and I have links in the end of my presentation, but we do a full hour-and-a-half long class on Foundation Director Online. You're welcome to view a recording of that, or you can schedule an appointment with me, and I'm happy to kind of talk through this in more depth. But for now, we'll do kind of a quick demonstration of this. So I'm on the homepage for Foundation Directory Online. I usually recommend that people use the advanced search and filters listed here. And then we can build our search. So if I click in the subject area box, we'll get a drop-down list of all those search terms. So these are the exact same terms from the Philanthropy classification system. So you can find the general kind of category you're looking for, and then you can kind of poke around in the different sections, see if there's a search term that you're most interested in. You can also just type in a word. So for example, if I type in digital, I'm looking for digital divide in this case, it will show up here on my search results. So once you've identified the search term you want to use, you can just click on it and it will be added to your search box. So for geographic focus, you're just going to start typing in the specific city, county, region, or state. So my 2 examples before, if your work is specifically in Philadelphia, you can just start typing Philadelphia. The county and the city show up, they're the same, so it doesn't matter which one you select. You can also do Delaware Valley region if the work that you do is in Philadelphia and the surrounding counties. Philadelphia for our search. And then you can also include a population served. So again, I find this most helpful if you do work with a very specific population. We have things like age groups, ethnic and racial groups, social and economic status, etc. I'm going to leave this blank for now. I just kind of want to focus on funders who are interested in funding the digital divide in Philadelphia. So these 3 search boxes are what you'll use to do this general search to find funders who are interested in funding your organization. I do just want to briefly highlight these other 3 search boxes because they may be useful for you. Organization name allows you to search for a specific organization. So you can either look up a grant maker. So if somebody said, hey, I think you should check out the Philadelphia Foundation, they might want to fund you. You could start typing in their name. And then it will show you search results that match that. So there's a number of organizations that have Philadelphia Foundation in their name. You want to look for the one that's labeled as grant maker. And then you could click on their name and go directly to their profile. You'll see there's a number of other organizations showing up in this list that are labeled as recipients. So you can also search for other nonprofit organizations. So if there's a nonprofit organization that's doing similar work to you, you could type their name into the organization name box, and then you'd be able to see a list of all the grants they've received and information on the funders who have given them grants. Next, we have location, and I always like to explain how location differs from geographic focus. So as our search stands right now, if a funder is physically located, their mailing address is in New York, for example, if they've identified Philadelphia and the digital divide as being of interest to them, then they're going to show up in our search results. But if we put our location in as Philadelphia, that funder in New York is not going to show up in our search results because they are not located here. So I don't recommend using location. I always recommend using geographic focus. So you will get a list of all the funders interested in funding what you've searched for, regardless of where they are located. And then this last search box is who's who, so people associated with foundations. So again, like I said, if you know someone at an organization, that can be really helpful. So you can try searching for a person's name and see if they are associated with any foundations. Again, either a board member or a staff member. So I'm going to click search. And then I'm going to just kind of briefly talk through our search results. So our search results are given to us in 3 formats: grant makers, grants, and recipients. So there are 22 grant makers interested in funding digital divide in Philadelphia. They've given out 58 grants in the past, and those grants went to 12 recipients or 12 nonprofit organizations. So most people start with the grant maker section. That's where they usually spend most of their time. So what I recommend doing, because you only see the first 5 on the list here, I recommend clicking the View All button. And then from there, the grant makers filters box appears. And within that box, we do have the option to exclude grant makers who are not accepting applications. So I usually tell people that that doesn't mean that they're never going to give to your organization, but it usually means you have to do a little bit more legwork up front. See if you know anyone there. You could try sending them a letter of introduction. But if you'd like to exclude them, you can check that box. We have a pretty small list, 22, so it probably wouldn't have been too cumbersome to leave them in our list. All right, so we now have our list of funders who fund the digital divide here in Philadelphia who do accept grant applications. The list is sorted by grant count, so the funders who have given the most grants to the digital divide in Philadelphia will show up at the top of our list. So Comcast came up first. I'm just going to click on their name just to show you what their profile looks like. So a couple of things to note right off the bat is we can see when their profile was last updated and when their grant information was last updated. So both are pretty recent. So that gives you a sense of how current the information is in their profile. The first section of the funder's profile is going to give you these lovely charts that give you a sense of their last 5 years of giving. So the first chart is going to show you the top 10 categories or subjects they've supported. So the digital divide falls under information and communication. So they've given $5.5 million just to that category, that general category in the last 5 years. We can also see where those grants are going. So if you're looking at a funder who's local here to Philadelphia or Pennsylvania, this isn't going to be as useful, but if you're looking at a funder who isn't based here or who gives nationally, you're going to want to look and see how much they've given to Pennsylvania in the last 5 years. And then I mentioned before how important it is to think about the grant size, how much you could ask for or expect from a funder. So this chart can help you start to get a sense of their typical grant size. So Comcast, it looks like, has a bit of a sweet spot of less than $5,000, but you can see they've given some grants in these other ranges as well. So what you'd want to look at next is the grant section, which shows up next in their profile. So they're going to give you the most common grant amount that this funder gives for our specific search, which is $13,000. So that's actually a little bit higher than where their kind of overall giving falls. So that's interesting to know. You're then going to see a list of all the grants that Comcast gave out, and for the digital divide here in Philadelphia. So you'll be able to see who they gave the grant to, the primary subject of the grant, the year it was given, and then the dollar amount of that grant. And this list is sorted by year given. You can click on the names of any of these recipients. A new tab will open, and within that tab, you'll find grant details, which will give a description of what the grant money was used for. So this was for community, computer, and internet class. We can see the other subjects that were used to categorize this grant, as well as the populations who were served by this grant. So I love looking at the grant details. I think it's the most important information in Foundation Directory Online because it really brings to life what it is a funder is funding. You know, it's one thing for a funder to say we fund information and communications, but what does that mean in reality? And this kind of grant detail section is going to kind of give you a glimpse into that reality. Another thing you might want to do from our grant section here is clear your search filters, just so you can get kind of a broader sense of what this funder is interested in funding. So once I do that, it refreshes the list and I get a list of all the grants that the Comcast Foundation has given out, regardless of subject area or location. Again, this is just helpful to see what else is a priority for them in addition to the digital divide. The rest of the profile is pretty self-explanatory, but I will just kind of point out a few highlights. So the next section is funding interest. So these are all the different areas that this funder is interested in supporting, what type of organization it is. So this is a company-sponsored foundation. They're the philanthropic arm of Comcast, probably pretty obvious to most of us here in Philadelphia. Because they are a company-sponsored foundation, there is going to be information on the related organization. So the affiliated company and then any other philanthropic arms that are associated with them. They'll have information here about that. We then have more about the funder, so purpose and activities, background and program areas. Other funders to consider is going to list out funders that, based on similar giving patterns, may also want to support your organization. And you can click on any of their names to look at their profiles. We then have the application section. So this is going to list out how you would apply for a grant with this funder, any specific documents you'll have to submit or information, deadlines, when the board meets, and you'll also see this gray giving limitations box, which will give any geographic limitations as well as things that this funder does not support. So always helpful to take a look at this. And some people even jump to this section of the profile before they look at anything else. Their financials are available. So if you'd like to look at any of their past financial documents, you can do that here. We then have the who's who section. So as I mentioned before, there is a list of board members and staff members associated with this foundation. They also will sometimes have links to people's LinkedIn profiles. That's another great way to see if you have any common connections with anyone at the foundation. The communications section will list out any philanthropic news articles about the funder. If they have any social media pages, those will be listed here. Publications are being pulled from a website called Issue Lab, which is another Candid product. And it's really just kind of like research reports, white papers, things like that. that are somehow associated or published by this particular foundation. And then we do have contact information for the funder. So location, email address, phone number. If they do have a website, I always recommend checking that for the most up-to-date information. It doesn't surprisingly look like they have listed a website, but if you can find it, I recommend taking a look at that for the most up-to-date information. So that is how you research foundations that might be interested in giving to your nonprofit organization using Foundation Directory Online. So I'm going to just jump back to my slides now because I do just want to briefly talk about Guidestar before we wrap up for today. So Guidestar is another Candid product. Again, Foundation Center, Guidestar merged to create Candid. But Candid is kind of like a storing house of information on nonprofit organizations. So any organization with 501c3 status is automatically included in Guidestar. But what a lot of nonprofits don't realize is that they can create a free Guidestar account and they can add additional information to their Guidestar profile. So if you don't claim and update your profile, there's just going to be some very basic information in there that's being pulled from your most recent 990. So updating your profile allows you to go beyond this IRS data and just give more context to the work the work that your organization does. So there's a few reasons why you might want to do this. One is that funders oftentimes will look you up in Guidestar as part of their due diligence. Volunteers, donors are oftentimes going to Guidestar to learn more about your organization. Things like Amazon Smile, Facebook fundraisers. If people are looking for more information on an organization through one of those platforms, it's going to link to Guidestar information. Also, donor advised funds, DAFs, are also using information from Guidestar. So it really is a good idea to make sure that the information in your Guidestar profile is up to date and accurate. Now, Guidestar has kind of a series of seals of transparency that organizations can earn that demonstrate that they have added a certain level of information to their profile. So there's bronze, silver, gold, and platinum. Right now, to incentivize nonprofits to update their Guidestar profiles, Candid is doing a promotion called Go for the Gold. So if your organization earns a gold seal of transparency, you can get a 1-year subscription to Foundation Directory Online Essential for free. So this is something you can access from anywhere. You do not have to be here at the Parkway Central Library. You will not get everything, all the kind of bells and whistles that our version provides, but you will be able to do essentially the search that I just showed you. Just to kind of very quickly show you what this looks like. So if you go to guidestar.org and click on search, you can search for your own organization, first of all, to see if your organization's profile has been updated. So if we were to search for TLC, here you guys are. Just to show you what this looks like. So TLC has earned a gold seal of transparency. They have a lot more information here than an organization that has not earned a gold seal. So we can see things like their mission, their programs and results, goals and strategies. Further down, there'll be information on their financials, as well as the demographics of the organization. So I always tell nonprofits, if there's a place on the internet where there's information about your organization, you want to make sure that it is current and up to date. So I highly recommend checking out Guidestar and making sure your profile is updated. So this kind of last slide here is just a link to some resources, some that I've already mentioned. So we have a link on here to request a virtual appointment, check out our upcoming events, sign up for our newsletter, get a free library card. Everyone should have one. If you live and work in Philadelphia, or live in the state of Pennsylvania, you can get a free library card. So please do that if you haven't already. I included a link to our video content library. So a number of our most popular workshops, as well as database demonstrations, are linked there. I included a link to Candid Learning, which is a free website that includes webinars, FAQ sections, sample grant proposals for you to read over. I included information about that Go for the Goal promotion that I mentioned before that Guidestar/Candid is doing. And then if you would like to learn more about the how and why of updating your profile in Guidestar, I included a link to a recent webinar we did called Tell Your Nonprofit Story Using Your Candid Profile. And then our contact information is there. So if you'd like to connect with me, you can send me an email, check out our website, or visit us on Twitter. So that's all I have for you all today. I think I'll turn things back over to Kate, and then I think we're going to take some questions at the end if there are questions, or happy to take them now if anyone has any now.
Thank you, Caitlin. Yes, I do have just a little bit of information to share with you all that's specific to digital equity work. So I'm going to share a few slides here. Is that in presentation mode? So if you use some of the resources that Caitlin shared today and identify some funders who you're going to apply for funding opportunities to, or if you already have funders that you're applying for, one of the things that's really helpful, as we all know, when you're applying for funding opportunities, is to have research and data that backs up the case for why your work is important, why it matters, what the issues are in Philadelphia, et cetera. So I just wanted to share quickly a few resources with you. These are certainly not comprehensive. There's a lot of information out there. But there is, first of all, the National Digital Inclusion Alliance, or NDIA. If you're not already familiar with them and you're interested in the digital equity work, I recommend checking them out. They have a ton of really great resources and information. They also have an email listserv, which you can join. It is a pretty active listserv, and it's across the country. So if you do sign up, I recommend getting the daily digest rather than every individual email, because it tends to clog up your inbox if you get the individual emails. But in addition to all the other resources they have a whole website with a list of different research studies and databases that you can search, including a really great broadband research database that you can go in and it has research, and it's actually tagged by kind of topic areas. And so, this is great for, especially the digital inclusion work that we do is usually tied to other kind of social service work. And so you can use this database to find research on digital inclusion and how it relates to whatever other issue areas you're working on. So for instance, if you're working on health, you can go into the database. There's a category for studies that are tagged with health, and then you'll be able to see research studies that were published that discuss health and digital inclusion. So that's a great database that you can search in to find information. Again, research and data that backs up the case for why your work is important and why a funder should invest in your organization. The Benton Institute also has a lot of research and policy information, as well as different newsletters you can sign up for. So it's another really great resource. Again, we will be sending these presentations out after the webinar today, so you'll have all these links in your inbox. A couple of resources that are specific to Philadelphia. So the city of Philadelphia recently was able to fund a household internet assessment report. We've done prior webinars on this, but if you missed it or you haven't seen the report, definitely recommend checking it out. It has really up-to-date, good information about who has internet and devices in Philadelphia, as well as what some of the barriers are that people identify that's keeping them from getting connected, concerns they have, really good information there. So that's really great information that a lot of other places don't have that level of information. They have to rely on maybe the census data and things like that. So this is a really great resource that we had in Philadelphia. And City of Philadelphia also recently released a 5-year digital equity plan. And again, if you have not taken a look at that, I recommend doing so, and thinking about how your work aligns with the goals in that plan, and be able to articulate that to funders. Because as we know, funders like to see that the work that your organization is doing connects with other work, connects with the goals and priorities of local government. And so if you get familiar with that report, you can also think about how you're in alignment there and express that to funders. Pennsylvania, as a state, did just recently create a PA Broadband Authority. And I'm going to talk in a minute about some big federal funding opportunities that are coming down the pike. And most of that funding is going to be coming through the Pennsylvania Broadband Authority. So I recommend starting to become familiar with who they are. They just very recently hired their executive director, and it's a team of two. There's an executive director and his assistant, and that's the whole team right now. And so the office is still very new, and they're still getting their feet under them. So they haven't been able to do a lot of outreach yet, but they did actually say that they could join a future TLC webinar. So hopefully we'll be able to introduce you to them in the future. But they're currently working on a digital equity planning grant application to the federal government, which I can talk a little bit more about in a little bit, but that plan is due in a couple of weeks. So they're focusing on getting that together. They do have board meetings. The list of board meetings is published on their website, and those are open to the public that you can attend in person in Harrisburg, or more easily, they have a Microsoft Teams link that you can attend virtually. So if you're really interested in hearing what they're talking about, you can see the list of board meetings on their website and attend and hear what's happening. But they are working on putting together some initial applications for funding. And they're also working on creating 4 subcommittees. And so, as I said, we'll be hearing more from them in the future. They're just getting started, but I wanted to make sure folks are aware they exist. I have my email address here. If you have questions, or if you, maybe you're trying to do a grant proposal and you want to find a certain research study and you're not sure if it exists, or you want some help, feel free to reach out to me and we can help try to connect you with whatever resources you're looking for. And then, so I did want to just talk very briefly. Some of you may know about this, some of you may not, or may not know the details. So the federal government recently passed legislation, the Infrastructure Act, that included this Internet for All initiative, which has a number of different funding streams specific to digital inclusion work. So this is all money that's coming. I'll talk about this. It's going to come slowly, but it's coming. And so I wanted to just give you an overview so you can start to be prepared for this. So there are 4 different funding streams here that will all be administered by the National Telecommunication and Information Administration, or NTIA, the federal government. Most of these are probably not going to apply to most of you. The BEAD funding, as well as the middle mile funding, are really focused on areas, more rural areas that don't have, for the most part, connected to the more rural areas that don't have connectivity at all, or not very good options. And then the tribal is obviously focused on Native American groups, and then, but the funding that would be most applicable to the work that you do is in the Digital Equity Act. So this is the way that the funding is going to be flowing. And there's a few, within the Digital Equity Act programs, there's a few different ways the money will be flowing. The Digital Equity Act programs broadly are just looking, again, just to fund programs that are doing digital equity work. So this could be, things like classes, refurbishing computers, a lot of the work that you all are doing. So the way that this money is going to flow, is a portion of funding that goes to the states, and again, that's going to go through the Pennsylvania Broadband Authority. So right now, they're accepting applications for planning grants. So that's the first. So the first chunk of money is just going to be for the state to do planning, and so I'll talk about the timeline on the next slide. But that's for a planning portion, and then after the planning portion is over, the states will be able to apply for this capacity grant program, which is funding that they'll then be able to re-grant to nonprofit organizations for your digital equity work. So eventually, there'll be some process where the state will be accepting proposals from nonprofits through this federal funding stream. Separately, there's also the competitive grant program. That funding will not flow through the states. So the NTIA at the federal government level will be issuing RFPs that nonprofits can then apply for funding directly from the federal government as a separate stream of funding. This is just how the funding is allocated. So it's 60 million for planning grants, 1.44 billion for the capacity grants, which are the grants that go to the states, and the states re-grant that funding to organizations within the state. And then 1.5 billion is the total amount allocated for the state for the state's funding. What was I just going to mention? No, I don't know. Okay, so that's some of the funding that's coming through, and then the timeline. Like I said, this funding is coming, but it is coming slowly. So the states are right now submitting applications for the funding that's to develop their digital equity plan. So those proposals are due on July 12th. That's what the PA Broadband Authority is working on right now. And then in September of this year, states will begin receiving the funding to do the planning process. The planning process will last a year. During that planning process, we will have opportunities to have conversations with the state about the plan that they're developing and hopefully provide input on that plan so that's responsive to the needs of our communities. After the plans are completed and submitted to the federal government, in spring of 2024 is when the capacity grants open. So that's when the money for the work that we all do is actually going to start flowing. And also in fall of 2024 is when the RFPs will be opening up for the competitive grants that nonprofits can apply directly to the federal government to receive. So it's a very exciting time. There's very significant investments in this work that are coming from the federal government, but they are coming very slowly. So in the meantime, I do encourage all of you to look for other funding sources for your programs, but start thinking about this. And just to note that these funding opportunities, because they're large funding opportunities, we highly recommend that you don't try to go it alone in applying for these opportunities when they become available. When about 10 years ago or so, the federal government had a different significant investment in digital equity work, and at that time, organizations came together and applied collaboratively for those funds. And we anticipate there being a similar process when this funding becomes available. We don't know yet what that process will look like. The city will definitely be taking a lead role in that process. We'll be reaching out to everyone, sharing more information as the time gets closer. But just start thinking about, your digital equity work, how it fits within Philadelphia's broader digital equity ecosystem, and what ways you may want to partner in the future with organizations to go after these larger funding opportunities. And we only have a few minutes left, so I'm going to stop there. That was my last slide. Yeah. So with our last few minutes, would love to hear any kind of questions or comments you all have, either on the information I presented or what Caitlin presented, or both. And feel free to put questions in the chat or unmute yourself and ask verbally.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, hi.
Hi, I'm Karen Leslie Henry. I'm from the Pennsylvania School for the Deaf. Thank you so much. This has been very informative. So thank you, Caitlin and Kate. I wanted to ask about, again, Caitlin, you mentioned that the Foundation Center is accessible at the free library during what times again?
So we are currently open Monday to Friday, 9 a.m. to 5 p.m.
And no appointment is necessary.
Correct. Yep. You can come in anytime during those hours. Like I said, if you think you're going to need more help or need, some more kind of experience with the database, you can schedule an appointment with me so you can learn a little bit more. But if you're kind of ready to hit the ground running, then yeah, you're welcome to come in anytime.
Is there a way to access the foundation sources there from my office?
So Foundation Director Online Professional, so what I just did a demonstration of, you do have to physically be here at the library to use it.
Right.
I mentioned that if you participate in that Go for the Gold campaign, you can get access to Foundation Director Online Essential that you could access from anywhere. And any organization or individual can purchase their own subscription to FDO. I believe when I checked last, a yearly subscription to the professional version is like $1,500.
Okay, that's helpful. Okay, thank you very much.
Welcome. Thank you.
And thanks, Karen. Any other questions or comments that anyone would like to share? Seeing some thank yous in the chat. That's always good to hear. I also put in the chat a link to a feedback form. We do ask you just to take a minute and let us know what you thought of the webinar. That helps us plan future webinars, make sure that we're your needs and get ideas for other topics to cover that might be useful as well. Just wait a few more seconds. Just one last chance. Any final questions? So yeah, again, thank you so much. Please take just a moment to complete that feedback form. That does help us plan our future webinars. I also want to thank Comcast. They not only were accidentally highlighted during the presentation.
I swear I didn't plan that. I swear.
But also help sponsor these monthly webinar series. So with that, yeah, thank you all so much. Thank you, Caitlin, for joining us this week. Oh yeah, thank you, Bob. Bob is here from Comcast. Bob is always a great person to connect.
Caitlin, I think you did a great job, and those are wonderful resources. I do have two quick observations. One, I mean, you're spot on in stressing that nonprofits should update their Guidestar profile, because on the flip side of this equation, all funders check out the applicants on Guidestar. And there's just, if you're asking for money, you should make it easy for people to give it to you. So we look for your EIN and your 990 and all that. And then, as you can see, that the information on Guidestar it's a little dated. I think the most current year you pulled up was 2018, and the world is a different place, right? So those averages for us were not a representation of what we're doing now. I would suspect that that's the case for funders everywhere. So that's, a great guide, not necessarily the gospel truth in a up to the minute basis, but just fantastic resources available at the library. Thank you.
And I'll also add, Bob, that kind of on the flip side of what you just said, funders you can go in and you can update your grants information in Foundation Director Online so it does more accurately reflect what you've given in the past year.
So I opened up my big mouth and I got more work out of it. But that's a great suggestion, and we will do that.
Yes, great.
All right, and we're at 3 o'clock, so thank you so much, everyone, and we will be sending out these slides afterwards. And, feel free to reach out if you think of any more questions. All right.
Thank you.
Have a great
Thanks,
day.
everyone.
Thank you. Thank you all.